Okay, so today we'll be continuing with a summary on long distance transport of water. So there are certain plants where they have to transport water. The plants have to transport water up to 110-meter height. So how are they doing that? From the root, against the gravitational force, they have to supply water to the tip of the plant, which is at around 110-meter tall. And you know that this transport of water or uptake of water, or it is also called as ascent of sap, it is against the gravitational force. It takes place through the xylem, and it has to reach against the gravitational force in a single direction. It is a unidirectional flow. So what forces are responsible for this mechanism of transport of water? See, in your practical classes, probably for the pathway of this transport of water, there is a balsam plant experiment. So they have not given it in the theory part, but you might be doing that in your practicals. Balsam plant is nothing but it has a translucent stem, neither opaque nor transparent. We call it as translucent. Translucent stem is there. So this, when it is kept it in a eosin solution, so you can find that after a few hours, you find that a healthy balsam plant, when it is placed in a eosin solution, you find streaks of red lines. It is visible because the plant is translucent. So this balsam plant is nothing but Karna Kundala, we call it in Kannada. Okay, the flowers are very much beautiful flowers. It looks like the earrings of Karna. So that is the reason they call it as Karna Kundala. So your parents might be knowing it. You can just ask them. You might have even played with the fruit. When you just press the mature fruit, it opens up with a wooded snake like, and the seeds are dispersed. So you might have seen it in parks. Some of them grow it even in their homes. So the balsam plant, you can just remember about. So this balsam plant has a translucent stem. So a healthy plant twig which is cut and placed in this eosin solution. So after a few hours, you notice that there are red streak of lines which are visible. And when they took a section and observed it under microscope, the section of the stem, they found that only the xylem vessels were stained. This indicated that the transport of water is taking place through the xylem. Okay, so the pathway of transport of water has been determined. It is the xylem vessels. In case of gymnosperms and pteridophytes, uh, it is going to be the tracheids. Okay, trachea or vessels in case of angiosperms. So that is the pathway of the ascent of sap or transport of water. So through that experiment, they have identified through which elements the uptake of water takes place. Then the mechanism of the transport of water. Various theories have been put forth, but for you, you are going to study only about the transpirational pull theory. I would also like to bring to your notice about one of the Indian scientists, Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose, who put forth a theory called as pulsatory theory. According to him, the cortical cells of the plant, they are contracting and expanding just like the heart, uh, the pumping the blood, the contraction and relaxation of this cortical cells is responsible for the uptake of water as per Sir J.C. Bose or Jagdish Chandra Bose. The negative aspect of this is when the living cells are killed, even then there is an ascent of sap taking place. When the living cells of the plants are killed, so even then there is an ascent of sap. So the pulsatory theory was ruled out. But Sir J.C. Bose, he also devised an instrument called as crescograph. Using this instrument, he was able to show the pulsatory movement in the cortical cells. But that pulsatory movement is not sufficient to pump the water for 110-meter tall tree. So even this was an incomplete theory. This theory is not accepted anymore. But historically, from the viewpoint of contribution of Indians towards the uh, uh, botany, I would just like to say this theory of pulsatory theory put forth by Sir J.C. Bose, Jagdish Chandra Bose, and he had devised an instrument called as crescograph. Okay, so he was also responsible for the radio signals. Many of them, there is a controversy whether J.C. Bose was the first to discover the wireless technology or was it Marconi. So there are various such conflicts. But anyway, let us remember about Sir J.C. Bose's contribution towards this transport of water by putting forth a theory called as pulsatory theory. And for that, he devised an instrument called as crescograph. But this theory is not accepted, and in reality the pulsatory force wouldn't be sufficient to pump the water to very tall trees. Okay, so remember about this. So long distance transport of water, so if we consider diffusion is a very slow process. So for the transport of water, it accounts for only short distance movement, like very short distance. You can say the diffusion is accountable for short distance movement of water. Example, the movement of molecules across a typical plant cell, so which is 50 micron meter, one plant cell, which is 50 micron meter. Micron means 10 to the power of minus 6. Such very small cell. So the through diffusion, which is a slow process, it takes about 2.5 seconds for traveling between within a plant cell, that is 50 micron meter. Just visualize the 110-meter tall tree. So would it be possible through diffusion for this ascent or uptake of water to take place? So this force through diffusion, it's a very slow process, and we cannot use this diffusion as an explanation for long distance transport of water, because it's a very, very slow process and it can move only in a short distance movement. With a plant cell measuring about 50 micron meter, it takes 2.5 seconds for diffusion to take place, and there should be always be concentration gradient for diffusion to take place. There should be concentration gradient. See, the long distance transport systems, it is a necessity for the substances to move faster across the long distance than slow movement. So it is a necessity that the substances should move faster along this long distances. Movement of substances are in bulk, and it is not patchwise movement of water, little by little of water. It is in bulk. So en mass movement of transport of water or en mass movement of food takes place. So movement of substances are in bulk. Bulk in the sense en mass. Okay. So from one point to another point, due to pressure differences. So between the 2 points, we call it as mass flow. So there is a pressure differences between 2 points, and there is en mass movement of substances, and we call that as mass flow or bulk flow. So the water, minerals, and food are generally moved by a mass flow system. So you have to remember about this mass flow system, wherein the water, food, and minerals are moving en mass in bulk from one point to another due to the pressure differences between the 2 points. In mass flow substances in solution, in mass flow, what happens is the substances in solution or in suspension, they also move along with this uh, water. So it is like just like substances floating on water, moving along with the river water. Okay, so some substances, it might be a fruit that might have fallen onto the river, so that fruit is carried along with these waves of the river. Similar to that, the substances dissolved or the substances suspended in this water, they are also carried en mass through this mass flow. So that is what it implies. But in diffusion, what happens is different substances, they are going to move independently depending on their concentration gradient. So you know that diffusion is a slow movement of solute, solvent, or gaseous molecule from a region of higher concentration to lower concentration. So the only if this difference is there, they can move. So the particles, the movement of diffusion of particles, it is independent of each other. But in mass flow, that is not the case. Whatever particles are suspended or in solution, they are carried en mass. Okay. So that is what you have to remember. And that is why diffusion is not accepted for describing the long distance transport of water. Okay. So the diffusion is independent for each substance and they depend on their concentration gradients. Whereas bulk flow is achieved either through a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient, example a garden hose. So you turn a tap and the water flows through this hose pipe. So this is a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient. Okay. Whereas in a negative hydrostatic pressure gradient, so whereas in a negative hydrostatic pressure gradient, that is suction through a straw. So it takes place, suction is through a straw. Okay, so that is what you have to remember about. So bulk flow is achieved either through a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient, example water flowing in a garden hose from the tap, that is considered to be a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient, or the bulk flow can be by a negative hydrostatic pressure gradient, as in case of the transport of water. This is similar to suction through a suction of soft drink through a straw. So whenever a straw is there in the soft drink bottle, so the liquid doesn't climb on its own. So we create a negative water pressure or hydrostatic pressure gradient by sucking. So once the air is sucked in and a vacuum is created, so the negative hydrostatic pressure gradient is created. As a result, the liquid flows through the straw pipe and it reaches our mouth. Okay, so this is a negative hydrostatic pressure gradient that we should be aware about. So transpiration is more by a negative hydrostatic pressure gradient, whereas the translocation is more like a hydrostatic, positive hydrostatic pressure gradient. So the bulk movement of substances in long distance, it takes place through the conducting tissue, that is xylem and phloem, and it is called as translocation. So you can transport of water, you can also call it as translocation of water through xylem. The transport of organic solutes, you can also call it as translocation of organic solutes through the phloem.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Can you explain the previous slade's second point, sir?
Which one? This bulk flow is achieved. See, it is like I told you that it can be through a positive, the bulk flow through the xylem or sieve tube, en mass it is flowing. Okay, the substances which are suspended or in solution, they are also carried along with this en mass. Okay, so it can be the plant hormones or minerals which are diffused in the solution. So they are also carried. So now there can be the bulk flow can be achieved either through a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient. And for that, they have given an example of a garden hose. See, you turn on a tap, the water flows through the pipe. The positive hydrostatic pressure gradient is you always know that water flows from a higher region to lower region. So the positive pressure hydrostatic gradient is across this higher to lower level. Okay, so whereas the negative pressure gradient is the water has to be carried from a lower region to higher region against the gravitational force, as you see in case of the uptake of water. For that to happen, there should be a suction force or a negative pressure should be created. So in plants, it is created by transpiration. They have given a suction through a straw. This implies as sucking the soft drinks, through a straw pipe. That is what is the example that they are given for negative hydrostatic pressure gradient in plants that suction force is created by transpiration. So the bulk flow can be either through a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient, like in a garden hose, the water flows from higher region to lower region. Okay, so whenever you hold the water pipe higher to that of the tap, so the water flow is stopped. You might have seen that. So it flows, a natural flow is there. So that is called as positive hydrostatic pressure gradient. So it can take place. See the bulk flow of food, the translocation of organic solutes. It is through a positive pressure gradient, but a negative hydrostatic pressure gradient, you can see it in case of the uptake of water. Okay, so through transpiration creates that suction pressure, or negative hydrostatic pressure is created by transpiration, which is responsible for the transport of water. They have not given those examples there, but I'm giving you those explanation here itself, which we'll be studying further. Okay, so any other doubts you have on this?
No, sir, it's clear, sir.
See, the absorption of water and minerals, they occur by diffusion. Okay, so within the root cells, root hairs you have, so the absorption of water and minerals occurs by diffusion through millions of root hairs present at the root tip. So what does the root hair does? It increases the surface area available for absorption. You just assume the epidermal cell did not have root hair, so then they would be having only this area for the absorption of uh, minerals and waters, which would be very less surface area. Since they are having a unicellular extension of root hair from their cell, so you can see the surface area has increased for water absorption as well as mineral absorption. And also they can go to the growth of these root hairs leads to further places than where the root is located. So that is also an advantage. So root hair increases the surface area available for absorption. The absorbed water is moved deeper into root layers. See, from the epidermis, the water has to, from root hair, it has entered the epidermal cell. From the epidermal cell, the water has to have a radial transport. It is a horizontal transport, not vertical transport. It is a horizontal transport. So we call it as radial transport. So the water has to move from the epidermal cell through the cortical cells, endodermis, pericycle, and finally reach the xylem. Okay, so still there, how is the water flowing through? So the absorbed water moves deeper into the root layers by two pathways. One is apoplast pathway, that is through the non-living components of the cell. Second one is symplast pathway, it is through the living components of the cell. So apoplast pathway, so they have shown this blue color. You can see that the water enters the cell through the root hairs and they are flowing through the cell walls, which are the non-living components of the cell, and the intercellular spaces. So in apoplast pathway, so the entry of water, so there are no barriers here at all. They just move through the cell walls, intercellular spaces, and finally they reach the endodermal cell. So when they reach the endodermal cells, the apoplast pathway further it cannot take place. Through the endodermal cells and pericycle, it has to move through the symplast pathway. That is through the cell it has to pass through. Through the cytoplasmic connection, they have to pass through. So when they reach the apoplast pathway is still the endodermal cell. When they reach the endodermal cell, they flow into the endodermis and pericycle through the symplast pathway. So that you have to remember about. So the apoplast pathway, so where is it taking place? It is apoplast pathway is a system of adjacent cell walls that is continuous except at the Casparian strips of the endodermis in the roots. So the Casparian strips are present in the neighboring endodermal cells. The endodermal cells without Casparian strips, we call it as passage cell. So apoplast pathway, the water has to reach to this passage cell. It cannot flow through the other cells because they are having this Casparian thickenings, which is due to deposition of suberin. They are hydrophobic. They don't allow water to enter. So water is channelized to enter only through the passage cell. Immediately to the passage cell, you find the xylem vessel placed. So that is also an advantage. So there is a channelized flow of water through the passage cell. So apoplast pathway, the water is going to enter through the cell walls and intercellular spaces. So it does not cross the cell membrane. So it reaches the endodermal cells. Still the endodermal cell, it is apoplast pathway. Once the water flows through the endodermis, it is through the symplast pathway. They enter the endodermis and the pericycle. Finally, the water is released into the xylem vessels. So in apoplast pathway, it occurs exclusively through the intercellular spaces and the walls of the cell. It does not cross the cell membrane. That is the reason apoplast pathway is also called as non-living pathway. It passes through the non-living components of the cell. So the apoplast pathway, water movement through apoplast is dependent on gradient and occurs through mass flow. So it is mass flow, and gradient means water potential gradient or concentration gradient. That is how what it implies here. Along the gradient, it takes place. So the water movement through apoplast is dependent on gradient and it occurs through mass flow. Okay, the apoplast does not provide any barrier to water movement. So you can see this blue colored one. There are no barriers for the water movement. As water evaporates in the intercellular spaces or the atmosphere, the tension develops in the continuous stream of water into the apoplast. Okay, so that is also one is taking place. The evaporation of water in the intercellular spaces, they create a negative suction, and that results in this tension results in continuous stream of water flowing in the apoplast. So hence mass flow of water occurs due to the adhesive and cohesive property of water. So you should understand that the mass flow and the continuous flow of water is because of cohesive force, that is force of attraction between similar molecules, water and water, and the force of attraction between dissimilar molecules, we call it as adhesive force. So the flow of water in a continuous stream is possible because of the adhesive and cohesive property of water. That is how en mass they are flowing in this apoplast pathway. See, in the Symplast pathway, it is a system of interconnected protoplasts. See, the epidermal cells are connected with the cortical cells through the plasmodesmatal connection. Similarly, the cortical cells are connected to this passage cell through the plasmodesmatal connection, and the endodermis are connected to the pericycle through the cytoplasmic connection or plasmodesmata, and finally the pericycle, from the pericycle the water enters into the xylem. So that is why Symplast pathway, it is through the living components of the cell. So the water flows, this red line indicates the Symplast pathway. So the water flows through the root hair and it reaches into the cells, cortical cells. It flows through the cortical cells, membranes of the cortical cells, through the plasmodesmatal connections, and finally it enters into the endodermis through the uh, protoplast or plasmodesmatal connections. It enters into the pericycle through this plasmodesmatal connection, and finally the water is it reaches the xylem vessels. So in this pathway, in Symplast pathway, the water travels through the cytoplasm of the living components of the cell. So through the cytoplasm, and there is intercellular movement is through the plasmodesmata. So the cytoplasmic connections between adjacent cells, we call it as plasmodesmatal connections. So through this plasmodesmata, the water is traveling through the cytoplasm, and you can notice this intercellular movement of this water through the plasmodesmata, the junction between neighboring cells through which cytoplasm are extended, through which cytoplasmic strands are extended. We call it as plasmodesmata. So define plasmodesmata, they might give you the junction between neighboring cells through which cytoplasmic strands they extend. or cytoplasmic connections are established. We call that as plasmodesmata. Okay, so through this intercellular movement is taking place through the plasmodesmata, which are nothing but junction between the neighboring cells through which the cytoplasmic strands extend. So water has to enter the cells through the cell membrane. Hence, the movement is slow. So movement is down a potential gradient. So the movement is slow as it enters through the cell membrane. Hence the movement is water movement is slow. The movement is down a potential gradient. Okay. So it is with the potential gradient. Symplastic movement may be aided by cytoplasmic streaming in some of the cells of aquatic plants like hydrilla leaf. If you see, the cells show the cyclosis movement of cytoplasm. So the cytoplasmic streaming might also help in this symplastic movement. So symplastic movement may be aided by cytoplasmic streaming as seen in hydrilla, which is a submerged aquatic plant. So the hydrilla leaf, if you notice, you can notice that cyclosis movement of cytoplasm will be moving in a circular movement. So we call it as cyclosis. This is nothing but cytoplasmic streaming. So this cytoplasmic streaming might also help in the symplastic movement of water. So in hydrilla leaf, movement of chloroplast due to cytoplasmic streaming is very much visible. Okay. So most of the water flow in the roots, the radial transport, they occur via the apoplast pathway since there are no barriers. Since the cortical cells are loosely packed and there are no barriers. So water can move without resistance. So most of the water flow in the roots occurs via the apoplast pathway. However, the endodermis is impervious to water. It doesn't allow water to flow through due to the Casparian strips. And these Casparian strips are because of the deposition of suberin, a band of suberized matrix it is. So water molecules are always directed to non-suberized wall regions, that is the passage cells wall regions. They are always channelized to the non-suberized wall regions. The water then moves through the symplast and again crosses a membrane to reach the xylem. So the water is then going to move through the symplast, that is through the symplast they are going to move. And see, even though they are apoplast, when they enter the endodermal cells, the pathway is symplast. And they again cross a membrane to reach the xylem. So the symplast pathway takes place from endodermal cells. Still endodermal cells, it was majority of water flows through the apoplast. So symplast, it is through the cytoplasmic connections, but apoplast pathway also later becomes symplast at the endodermal cells. So even here you notice that so the water molecules are directed to non-suberized wall regions. The water then moves through the symplast and again crosses a membrane to reach the xylem. So they move through the symplast, that is the cytoplasmic established connections, nothing but plasmodesmata, and then they cross a membrane, so the cell membrane to reach the xylem. Okay. So the water movement through the root layers is ultimately symplastic in the endodermis. This is the only way water and solutes can enter the vascular cylinder. Okay, that is the xylem and phloem. We call it as vascular cylinder. Here in particular, xylem. In young roots, water enters directly into the xylem vessels and tracheids. So you can notice in the young roots, the water directly enters into the xylem vessels and tracheids. They don't go through this all this apoplast symplast pathway. In young roots, the water directly enters into the xylem vessels and tracheids. These are non-living conduits and are also part of the apoplast pathway. So in young roots, they only undergo apoplast pathway. So the water directly enters into the xylem vessels and tracheids. So these are non-living conduits and so are part of the apoplast pathway. See, in the some plants, they are having additional structure for water and mineral absorption. Example, mycorrhizae will be found associated with the roots of such plants. So the additional structures are mycorrhizae. Some plants are having additional structures for water and mineral absorption. Example is mycorrhiza. So mycorrhiza is a symbiotic association of a fungus with a root system. So the fungal filaments, they form a network around the young root or they penetrate the root cells. Okay, a symbiotic association of a fungus with a root system, you notice. So fungal filaments, they form a network around the young roots. They are forming a mesh of network around the young roots, which penetrate into the root cells. So the hyphae of this mycorrhiza, they absorb mineral ions and waters from the soil. In turn, the roots provide them sugar and nitrogen compounds to mycorrhizae. So such symbiotic association with mycorrhiza, it forms an extension of the root system. So the hyphae helps in further absorbing mineral ions and the water from soil. The roots in turn provide this mycorrhizae with sugar and nitrogen compounds. So both of them are being benefited by this interaction or interrelationship. Okay, so we call it a symbiotic uh, relationship or association that you can notice. Okay, some plants have an obligate is mandatory or compulsory association with the mycorrhiza. Example is pinus seeds. They cannot germinate and establish without the presence of mycorrhizae. So you have to understand the pinus seeds, they cannot germinate and establish without the presence of mycorrhizae. So it is compulsory that they are associated with mycorrhizae for the seeds to germinate in case of pinus. Pinus is a gymnosperm plant. So they have this needle-like leaves. Probably you might have seen the pine forest in Ooty or Kodaikanal or any hill stations, you find this pine forest. So the pinus seeds, they cannot germinate and they cannot establish without the presence of this mycorrhizae. So it is almost obligate or mandatory for them to be present. So now the water movement of upper plant. So water moves up a stem against gravity. So it needs energy. So what is that energy to pull it up? So is it root pressure? So some of the scientists were of the opinion about root pressure, but this root pressure isn't sufficient. Anyway, let us understand what is the root pressures. So as the ions from the soil are actively transported, so the mineral ions and others, they are actively transported into the vascular tissues of the root. Water follows its potential gradient and increases the pressure inside the xylem. So along with the ions, the mineral ions, the water, they are going to increase the pressure inside the xylem. This positive pressure is called root pressure. So the positive pressure created by the entry of ions and water flowing through the water potential gradient. So this, it creates a positive pressure, and this positive pressure within the xylem, we call it as root pressure. So this positive pressure or root pressure, it is similar to the hose pipe. Okay, just like the tap being turned on and the water flows through the hose pipe. So here a positive pressure gradient is created in the root cells. This positive pressure is called as root pressure, and this root pressure, it helps to push up water against the gravitational force to small heights in the stem. So this positive pressure within the root, it helps to push the water against the gravitational force to small heights in the stem. Okay. So experiments which are done to prove the existence of root pressure are early in the morning. If you cut uh, herbaceous plant at its base early in the morning, so you notice that water oozes out from this cut part of the stem. So the solution oozes out from the cut part of the stem, and that is because of the positive root pressure. So if we do it in the afternoon session, we might not be able to see at that. Reason being, so they would be uh, they would be evaporated by the heat, so you cannot see that water oozing out later in the day. So during early morning, having atmospheric moisture, if you cut a soft plant like a herbaceous plant, stem horizontally near the base. So, like a coriander plant, you can cut them at the base, or a mint plant, pudina, you cut them at the base. Drops of solution ooze out of the cut stem, and this water oozing out from the freshly cut stem is due to the positive root pressure. Okay, at night and early morning, evaporation is low, so the excess water collects as droplets. So in the night and the early morning, the evaporation is very low, so the excess water, they collect as droplets around the special openings of veins near the tip of leaf blades. So what you consider to be a morning dew is not a morning dew, it is a guttation factor. Even in cricket, dew factor plays an important role if they are saying it, especially in day and night match and in the night session. So it should not be called as dew factor. What is that factor? It is guttation factor. Okay, so it is not that water is condensing and they are collecting on the leaf blades as morning dew. It is the water which is oozing out from the plant. Why is it oozing out early in the morning and late in the evening? Is when the evaporation is less. So the water collects as droplets around special openings of veins near the tips of grass blades and leaves of many herbaceous plants. So such water loss in liquid phase, we call it as guttation. Such loss of water in the form of liquid uh, water in the form of droplets, water droplets, we call it as guttation. So loss of water in the form of water vapor through the stomata, we call it as transpiration. But here there is loss of water in the form of uh, water droplets through special openings or water stomata or hydatode. Okay, they have not used that term, but you can remember that the opening we call it as water stomata or hydatode. So such loss of water we call it as guttation. So guttation is also an indication of the root pressure. Okay, because of the positive root pressure, the water is lost through the leaf through this opening of veins near the tip of grass blades or in the leaves of many herbaceous plant. So early in the morning, you can notice such beautiful water droplets accumulating at this vein openings in a dicot leaf. See the pattern of arrangement of it. Okay, what we consider it to be a morning dew is not a morning dew; it is a guttation droplet. Okay, so this process of loss of water in the form of water droplets through this special opening in the vein, we call it as guttation. Okay, and one of your friends had asked whether guttation is there no closing or opening of stoma. So the water stomata are open throughout the day. Why don't you see in the afternoon session these sort of water droplets is when the evaporation through transpiration is higher, the plants cannot do not have enough water to lose through this guttation aspect of it. That is the reason you don't see the water droplets being lost in the uh, later part of the day when the evaporation rate is high. Okay, and water stomata is open throughout the day. There is no opening and closing mechanism in water stomata. You have to remember about that also. Okay, the opening and closing of stoma only in case of the uh, dicot in the stomata, you can notice that. Okay, so the water movement up a plant root pressure can only provide a modest push in the water transport. It has no major role in the transport of water for tall trees. So root pressure can only provide a modest push of water in a herbaceous plant that can be beneficial, but not in huge trees. So it has no major role in water movement uh, of very tall trees. The greatest role of root pressure is to re-establish the continuous columns of water molecules in the xylem, which often break. So whenever there is a break in the water chain due to the tensions created by transpiration, that break in water chain is compensated by this flow of water due to root pressure. That is what it is doing. So the compensation of that break of water molecules is being done by the movement of water due to root pressure. So the greatest role of root pressure is to re-establish the continuous chain of water molecules in the xylem, which often breaks under the tensions that are created by the transpiration. So it helps in maintaining this continuous water column chain. Whenever the water column chain is broken by the tensions of the transpiration, so that break is compensated by the movement of water due to positive pressure, that is the root pressure. In most plants, majority of water transport occurs by the transpirational pull. In majority of the plants, the transport of water for long distances, it occurs through the transpiration. Okay, so here they are just showing. So root pressure that is created, the cohesion and adhesion is responsible for the continuous column of water to be transported, and transpiration is responsible for the water reaching even to the tip of the plant. So the next theory that we'll study about is the transpirational pull theory or cohesion tension theory. This was put forth by two scientists, Dixon and Joly. They have not mentioned it here, but you remember it for CET or for your NEET examination. So they might ask such questions. The transpirational pull theory or cohesion tension theory was put forth by Dixon and Joly. So in plants, the water flows upward through the xylem and it reaches a fairly high rates, up to 15 meter per hour. So the water flow upward through the xylem, it is nearly 15 meters it climbs per hour. So that is exceptionally long distance to happen without any expenditure of energy. How is this water traveling? Traveling up to 15 meter per hour. That is mainly happening through the plant. So the water is pulled through the plant, and the driving force for this process is transpiration. What is transpiration? Loss of water in the form of water vapor through the stomata present on the leaf, or through the lenticels present on the stem, or through the cuticle present on the leaf, damage of cuticle. So we call that as transpiration. So I have already told you the transpiration through the leaves, nearly 90% of water is lost through transpiration by stomata. So cuticular transpiration 5%, lenticular transpiration 5%. So the transpirational pull, especially the foliar transpirational pull, is responsible for the water to be pulled at a rate of 15 meter per hour. And this is also called as cohesion tension transpirational pull model of water transport, because cohesion tension is like the water molecules are held in a continuous chain, and that is because of the cohesion and adhesion force that they have. This cohesion is force of attraction between similar molecules, adhesion is force of attraction between dissimilar molecules. So now let us understand transpiration before we completely understand this transpirational pull theory. So the force of attraction between the walls and the water molecule, we call it as adhesion. This is dissimilar. Okay, walls of the vessels. The force of attraction between water and water molecules, similar molecules, so we call it as cohesion. And it is the water is pulled through the transpirational pull, and water flows as a continuous chain because of the cohesion and adhesion forces. So I have already told you the example of borewell and flow of water from the boiler to the uh, your bucket, so using a sucked pipe. So they are all similar to this transpirational pull theory. I've given you those analogy of examples to explain this transpirational pull theory. Now let us understand about this transpiration more in details. See, transpiration, you find the stomata. When you take the leaf epidermal peel, sometimes when you peel the leaf in a cross way, you find a transparent membrane either below or above. So that transparent membrane, you just cut it and place it under microscope. That is the epidermal peel, we call it as, where you can see this epidermal layer with stomata. Okay, so especially in dicot leaf, the stomata will be at the lower surface of the leaf. They are hypostomatic, whereas in monocot leaf, both the upper and lower epidermis they'll have stomata. So you should understand that the stomata is at the lower surface of the leaf. They are hypostomatic. Here it is in case of dicot leaf. In case of monocot leaf, you find the stomata both at the upper surface and lower surface, upper epidermis and lower epidermis. So we call it as amphistomatic. So you should be aware about these terms, which we have studied in dorsiventral leaf, isobilateral leaf in anatomy. Okay. See, what is transpiration? It is the evaporative loss of water by plants through the stomata in the leaves. So the loss of water by the plants in the form of water vapors through the stomata in the leaves, we call it as transpiration. But I've also told you the transpiration can occur through lenticels. Lenticels are openings formed due to secondary growth. So the rupturing of epidermis, and there is complementary tissue below that, which is made up of parenchyma. So this rupturing of epidermis at certain points during secondary growth, we call it as lenticels. You know about that. Or it can also be, the transpiration can also take place through cuticle, damage of cuticle. So the major transpiration is through the foliar transpiration, that is through the stomata present on the leaves. So the evaporative loss of water by plants through the stomata in the leaves, we call it as transpiration. So there is an experiment done to demonstrate the transpiration. We call it as the cobalt chloride paper experiment. So a leaf is placed in between two cobalt chloride paper. Okay, so in between a slide and the cobalt chloride paper is placed on both upper and lower surface, and another slide is placed and we just put a rubber band on both the ends. After few duration, you find that if it's a dicot leaf, the lower surface of the cobalt chloride paper, so they turn from blue to pink, which indicates that there is loss of water. And whenever loss of water is taking place, the cobalt chloride, they are going to absorb the moisture. As a result of it, they cobalt chloride, which is blue in color, they turn to pink. So which indicates that transpiration is taking place. So during transpiration, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the leaf also occurs at the same time. So not only transpiration, but there is also exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the leaf is also occurring during transpiration. So in majority of the plants, except for CAM plants, the stoma is open during the daytime and stoma is closed during the night time. Okay. Except for CAM plants are crassulacean acid metabolic plants. Like these are found in case of kalanchu, kalanchu which has leaf buds. So these plants are called as CAM plants. In CAM plants, they are like call center employees, I had already told you. So they open their stoma during night time and close it during daytime. Okay, so that they avoid transpiration. At the same time, photosynthesis also can take place. So they open their stoma during nighttime and stoma is closed during daytime. That you see in CAM plants. Okay, so during transpiration, there is exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide also taking place in the leaf simultaneously. ಒಂದೇ ಸಲ ಅದು ಆಗ್ತಿರತ್ತೆ. Not only there is loss of water in the form of water vapor through the stoma, there would also be exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Maybe carbon dioxide is entering through the stoma for photosynthesis. Oxygen, which is synthesized during photosynthesis, might be leaving out or exiting from the stoma. So the stoma opening and closing, I told you about Hanuman just tearing his heart to reveal Rama and Sita, similar to that somewhat. So the inner walls of the guard cells, they are thick. Okay, the outer walls of the guard cell, they are thin. So to open these thick walls, there should be more pressure. And the inner walls, they are not only thick, but they are also elastic. So how is it opened up? Whenever the guard cells become turgid during due to endosmosis, so the outer walls they are pulled. As a result, the inner walls opens in a crescent shape and the stoma is open during the daytime. Okay. So stomata are open in daytime and close during night. So the opening of or closing of stomata is due to change in the turgidity of the guard cells. If they become more turgid during daytime, there is opening of stoma. Less turgid and they return to their normal position, there is closure of stoma in the night time. So the inner wall of guard cells, they are lined by this, uh, they are having this thick and elastic walls. The inner wall of guard cell lining the stomatal aperture or stoma. The opening is called as stoma or stomatal aperture. The inner wall of guard cell lining the stomatal aperture, they are thick and elastic, and the outer wall is thin. So when turgidity of cells increases, the outer wall bulge out and pull the inner walls into the crescent shape. The outer walls, they are going to bulge out and it pulls the inner walls into a crescent shape. Now the stoma is open. So this is because of the turgidity of the guard cell during daytime. So the cellulose microfibrils also you can notice in the guard cells, they are arranged radially rather than longitudinally. Since they are arranged radially, it becomes easier for the stoma to open. So whenever the guard cells are increases in their turgidity, so the radial walls, the microfibrils, cellular microfibrils which are arranged radially, it becomes easier for them to open the stoma. So the guard cells lose turgidity due to water loss or water stress, and the inner walls regain their original shape, especially during the night time. Okay, the lower surface of a dicot leaf has a greater number of stomata. In monocot leaf, both upper and lower epidermis they have equal distribution of stomata. So then the factors which are affecting transpiration are, so the external factors like temperature, so light, see the more the temperature and greater will be the uh, evaporation. So if evaporation is greater, the transpiration would also be higher. See, for transpiration to occur, the water should evaporate. So the temperatures are important. Light, humidity, wind. So these also play an important role in the transpiration. I had told about how light indirectly also affects the temperature. Light also brings about photosynthesis. Okay. And humidity, for the guard cells to become turgid, the photosynthesis might also be one of the factors. So humidity, I've described about Delhi and Chennai. I told you that if the atmosphere has more humidity, the transpiration will be lesser. If the atmosphere has lower humidity, the rate of transpiration will be higher. And wind also plays an important role. The movement of air, so the water vapor, which has collected along this canopy or leaves, they are removed by the wind factor. As a result, whenever they are removed, more transpiration they could occur. If they are not removed, they would have point a saturation point and transpiration would be slower. So once the wind removes this water vapor layer above the leaves, so it creates an opportunity for more transpiration to take place. That is how wind facilitates the increase in rate of transpiration. The now plant factors which plays an important role in transpiration is the number of stomata and distribution of stomata, number of stomata open, water status of the plant, and canopy structures. So if they are wider canopy, there is more transpiration. If they are narrower canopy like conifer forests, so there would be lesser transpiration. So the transpiration driven ascent of xylem sap, it depends on the following physical properties of water: cohesion, mutual attraction between similar molecules, that is water molecules, addition, attraction of water molecules to polar surfaces, example surface of tracheary elements, surface tension. In liquid phase, water molecules are more attracted to each other than in gaseous phase. So the surface tension will be more in liquid phase. In liquid phase, the surface tension is also one of the reasons for the water to be in a continuous column. So water molecules are more attracted to each other in a surface liquid phase than in a vapor phase or gaseous phase. So these properties of water, that is cohesive, adhesive, and surface tension, they provide they give water high tensile strength. So they can flow against the gravitational force without collapsing. So they have a high tensile strength is provided to the water, that is ability to resist a pulling force. The pulling force here is gravitational force, and they also have high capillarity. Capillarity is the ability to raise in thin tubes. When you put a straw into soft drinks, you find that the liquid rises to certain distance without being sucked. So that we call it as capillarity force. So they have high tensile strength and high capillarity, that is ability to rise in thin tubes. In plants, capillarity is aided by the small diameter of the tracheary elements, that is the tracheids and vessel elements. So smaller the diameter, greater will be the water transport. See, here the water transport is not taking place through a huge pipe. It is taking place through the microscopic xylem vessels or tracheids. So you should understand that. So the plant capillarity is also further aided by the smaller diameter of the tracheary elements or vessels or tracheids. So the xylem vessels from the root to the leaf vein, they supply water for photosynthesis. Water is majorly required for photosynthesis. One of the raw material for photosynthesis is water along with carbon dioxide. So there is a continuous thin film of water over the cells. So as water evaporates through the stomata, water pulls into the leaf from the xylem. So whenever there is evaporation through the stomata, there is a suction force created, and that suction force is created by this transpiration. So water pulls into the leaf from the xylem. In atmosphere, the concentration of water vapor is lower than the substomatal cavity and intercellular spaces. Okay, this also helps water to diffuse into the surrounding air. So that creates a pull. See, the surrounding air will be having lower concentration of water vapor when compared to the substomatal cavity and intercellular spaces. So there is a difference, gradient is there. So this also helps the water to diffuse into the surrounding air, thus creating a pull. The forces generated by transpiration can create pressure enough to lift a water in xylem-sized column of water, xylem-sized column of water, not any column of water. This force generated by transpiration can create pressure sufficient to lift a xylem-sized column of water over 130 meters tall tree high. So that is the reserve, more than 30 floors higher than that the water can flow. And it is not in huge pipes, it is in xylem-sized column of water. It can flow over 130 meters high due to the transpiration. So transpiration and photosynthesis, it's a compromise. So photosynthesis is limited by available of water. So if water is less, the photosynthesis is less. So if water is more, photosynthesis is more. So because it is one of the raw material for photosynthesis. So the photosynthesis is limited by available water, and this water is lost through transpiration. I had already told you a concept of transpiration is a necessary evil, because nearly 95% of water absorbed is lost through transpiration. Only 5% of it is retained. Of this 5%, only 1% is retained for the photosynthesis. Okay. So the humidity of rainforest is mainly due to transpiration. So the transpiration makes the humidity of the rainforest. So the water vapor is more in the atmosphere because of the transpiration. It is mainly due to the cycling of water from root to leaf, and from leaf to atmosphere and back to the soil. From root to the leaf, from leaf to the atmosphere, and when they precipitate back to the soil. So this is how the cycling of water is taking place. And one of the reasons for the cycling of water is also transpiration. So the humidity of rainforest is mainly maintained due to the transpiration. So there is a conflict between transpiration and photosynthesis. Transpiration majorly it loses out water, and for photosynthesis water is required. So there is a compromise here, there is a conflict here between transpiration and photosynthesis. In order to overcome this conflict, certain plants are there which have the C4 photosynthetic system. So C4 plants, we call it as, or hatch and slack pathway. So the normal photosynthesis is C3 pathway, Kelvin cycle. So whereas in the C4 plants, hatch and slack pathway, so examples are the sugarcane, maize, they are all the plants which exhibit the C4 pathway. So they are going to help to maximize water retention, maximize availability of carbon dioxide, and minimize water loss. That you notice in C4 photosynthetic plant. So later we'll be discussing this in photosynthesis. So remember this important sentence. C4 photosynthetic plants, they are going to help to maximize carbon dioxide absorption, minimize the loss of water. Okay. In C4 plant is twice as much efficient, more efficient, twice more efficient as a C3 plant in fixing carbon. However, it loses only half the amount of water as a C3 plant for the same amount of carbon dioxide fixed. So that is the advantage. So C4 is a compromise established to avoid the conflict of transpiration and photosynthesis. So the C4 photosynthetic system is a compromise to avoid the conflict of transpiration and photosynthesis. So the C4 plants, they are much more photosynthetically efficient than C3 plants because they are able to maximize carbon dioxide absorption and minimize water loss. So they are twice more efficient than C3 plant in photosynthesis, and they lose only half the amount of water to fix the same amount of carbon dioxide as done by a C3 plant. So that is the compromise that has been reached in C4 photosynthetic plants. So the transpiration uses, I've told you majorly, a huge amount of water is lost because of transpiration. Whatever water is absorbed, 95% of it is lost. So that is why we call it as transpiration is a necessary evil, necessary for ascent of sap, even for translocation of food, they are required, but uh, they are also a harmful factor. So the transpiration uses are, it creates transpiration pull for absorption and transport of food, water, everything it is required. So that transpirational pull, the negative hydrostatic pressure gradient is created. It supplies water for photosynthesis. That is also one of the advantage of this transpiration. Transports minerals from soil to all parts of the plant, and they cool the leaf surfaces. Sometimes it is nearly 10 to 15%. The temperature is brought down by this transpiration. Around the cool surface, leaf surfaces, they cool the leaf surfaces, similar to the perspiration or sweating in us. By evaporation, they are going to reduce the temperature surrounding these leaves. So they maintain the shape and structure of the plants by keeping cells turgid. So transpiration also helps in maintaining the shape and structure of the plants by keeping the cells turgid. So these are the benefits of transpiration. Then uptake and transport of mineral nutrients we also discussed about. So wherein most minerals are actively absorbed by the roots. So minerals are present in the soil as ions. Okay, so they are charged ions, so which cannot move across the cell membranes. Okay, so the concentration of soil minerals is lower than that in the root. So now these minerals have to be absorbed against the concentration gradient. So there is an active uptake of ions. The uptake of ions is active, that is expenditure of energy is there to absorb against the concentration gradient the minerals. From soil, the minerals are very low in concentration in soil when compared to the roots. So there has to be active absorption of ions. Okay. So for the water potential, so the entry of ions is also responsible for the water potential gradient in roots, and therefore for the uptake of water. So when the ions enter, so the water potential gradient of the roots, they are going to decrease. So the water potential gradient decreases when compared to the stem. That is also one of the reason for uptake of water by osmosis. So some of the ions are absorbed passively when their concentration is more in soil and lesser in root. They are absorbed passively. It is not that all ions are absorbed actively. Some of the ions which are in lower, higher concentration in soil, they are absorbed passively. So the specific membrane proteins of root hair cells, the membrane proteins that are present, they actively pump ions from the soil into the epidermal cells because it's an active process. There is expenditure of energy. The endodermal cell membrane, they also have transport proteins. Okay. They allow some of the solutes across the membrane, but not others. So these proteins on the membranes, they are control points which adjust what type of ion to enter and exit. And the quantity of ion to enter and exit is controlled by the membrane proteins present on the membranes. Okay. The suberin in the root endodermis, they allow the active transport of ions in only one direction. So the ions reach the xylem, and once they have reached the xylem, they are further transported to all parts of the plant along with water through the transpirational stream. So the chief sinks for mineral elements where they are required. So the young leaves, growing regions such as the apical meristem and lateral meristem, young leaves require this mineral elements, so they are the sink region. So the developing flowers and fruits, fruits, and seeds, they require mineral elements, and storage organs also require mineral elements. So these are all the sink region of utilization, or the sink region for mineral elements. So the translocation of mineral ions is by transpirational pull. You already know that. Unloading of mineral ions occur at the fine vein endings. So the unloading of it is taken so at the fine vein endings through diffusion and active uptake by this cells. Okay, mineral ions are also frequently remobilized by the older leaves, the dying out leaves, older senescing leaves, and the remobilized ions are utilized by uh, younger leaves. So the elements which are remobilized are, you can remember it as I told you as NPS, NPKS, we can remember it as. So the N is nitrogen, phosphorus, K stands for potassium, S is sulfur. They are the remobilized ions from the older senescing leaves to younger leaves. Some of the elements that are structural component, they cannot be remobilized, like calcium, which are structural component, they cannot be remobilized. So nitrogen in they are mainly carried in organic form as amino acids and related compounds. Some of these nitrogen they also travel as inorganic ions. Okay, phosphorus and sulfur are also carried as organic compounds. There is also exchange of materials between xylem and phloem. So hence we cannot clearly say that xylem transports only inorganic nutrients while phloem transports only organic materials. Because there is an exchange of materials between xylem and phloem, there is no clear cut clarity as to what is xylem exactly. You cannot say that xylem is carrying the inorganic nutrients and phloem are carrying the organic nutrients. So that clear cut distinction we cannot make. So the next that we discussed was phloem transport, which is flow from the source region to the sink region. You know that the leaves are the source region where food is synthesized in the form of glucose. So glucose will be transported through the phloem in the form of sucrose that you should also be aware about. So the photosynthesis products, this is the source region. Sink region is where they are utilized. Source region is the region of synthesis. Sink region is the region of utilization. Okay. So the transport of food or phloem transport or flow from source to sink, it is a long distance movement of organic substances. Okay, here this diagram, it gives a very clear indication from the source, that is the region of synthesis of food, to the sink, region of storage or utilization of food, through the phloem. It is happening through the phloem. The source and sink may be reversed depending on the season or the plant's need. In early spring season, when all the leaves are lost in the autumn season, in the early spring season, when the buds are developing, the roots become the source region and the buds become the sink region. So the source and sink may be reversed depending on the season or the plant's need. In early spring, that is just after the autumn season, there are no leaves in the trees and they cannot synthesize food. So in those times, in early spring, when the buds are sprouting up, the sugar stored in the roots is moved to the tree buds for growth and development of the photosynthetic apparatus. So thus root becomes the source in early spring and buds become the sink region. Okay. So the direction of movement in the phloem can be upwards or downwards. So it is bidirectional or multi-directional flow, you can call it as. In xylem, the movement is always upwards, unidirectional. Hence, food in phloem sap can be transported in any direction. So food in phloem sap, it can go to radial transport, downwards, upwards, it can transport. What is the phloem sap majorly made up of? It consists of sucrose, mainly water and sucrose, but other sugars are also present. Hormones are present, and amino acids are present in this phloem sap. So the hypothesis that explains mechanism uh, of transport translocation of sugar or phloem transport is the pressure flow hypothesis or mass flow hypothesis. So this was put forth by a German scientist Ernst Mach, or Mach's mass flow hypothesis. We also call it as Ernst Mach put forth this pressure flow hypothesis to explain the transport of food or the phloem transport. Okay, so the glucose is prepared at the source region, that is the leaf. It is converted to sucrose, okay, a disaccharide. Then the companion cell, it is uploading it to the loading it to the sieve tube. Okay, there is expenditure of energy. I told you the loading, unloading, vein loading and vein unloading. So it is similar to the truck which is filled with sand by the laborers at the loading point and unloading point. The laborers are going to unload it. So there is expenditure of energy at both the ends. So you can compare it with that. So there is vein loading and unloading. So the glucose prepared at the sucrose is converted to sucrose. The glucose is converted to sucrose and they are loaded into the sieve tube. Sucrose is moved into the companion cells and then into the living phloem sieve tube by active transport. This loading is by expenditure of energy. So active transport, that means ATP is utilized. So it produces, once the food is loaded here into the sieve tube, it produces a hypertonic in phloem. So this becomes hypertonic, so because of more solutes, so the water potential decreases. When the solute potential increases, uh, the water potential, the solute potential decreases because of more solutes, and water enters from the xylem into the phloem. Okay, so sieve tube cells, they form a continuous columns because of the sieve plates, where the holes in the sieve plates, the cytoplasmic strands pass through these holes and they form a continuous filament. Okay, so now you already know that it is hypertonic here. The water flows from the xylem into the sieve tube, and en mass, this food is carried to the region of utilization where the uh, water potential is, where it is hypotonic in nature, and water potential gradient is lower. So the n mass, the food is carried by the water that enters through the from the xylem into the sieve tube. Okay, the cytoplasmic strands, they are going to form a continuous strands uh, in the phloem. So water in the adjacent xylem moves into the phloem by osmosis as osmotic pressure or hydrostatic pressure. This is positive hydrostatic pressure. It builds up. The phloem sap moves to areas of lower osmotic pressure, sink region, where the pressure is lesser. So once they reach the sink region, you can notice that so the solutes are going to enter in and the water is going to diffuse into the xylem. Okay, the sucrose from the phloem sap actively moves into the cells in the sink region. Okay, that is again unloading is also done by the companion cell, and again it is an active process. There is an expenditure of energy. So the sink gets this sucrose. The cells in the sink region, they are going to convert the sucrose into energy, starch, or cellulose, a complex carbohydrate. As sugars are removed, the osmotic pressure decreases, the water potential increases, the osmotic pressure decreases. So water potential is more, and water from this phloem moves out of the phloem into the xylem. So the water moves out of the phloem into the xylem. So this is how the flow of food is taking place by the interaction with xylem and phloem. Okay, so the translocation of food or phloem uptake. The final part for our discussion is how is this phloem transport taking place through the phloem? How has it been discovered? So for this, they have done a ringing bark experiment or girdling experiment, wherein the bark was carefully removed from the twig, healthy twig. So it has so they have retained the xylem and the other regions, but they have removed the bark with phloem. So bark with phloem layer, they have removed it. After a few weeks, the portion of the bark above the ring, so you notice that it is swollen because of accumulation of food. If the xylem was a food conducting tissue, there would not have been the tissue would not have been swollen. So this shows that phloem is the tissue responsible for translocation of food, and that transport takes place in one direction. That is, there is also a translocation of food in the direction of root. That is indicated by this girdling experiment or ringing bark experiment. With diagram, you have to explain whenever they have asked this identification of the tissue that transports food. Write an experiment to identify the tissue that transport food. So you have to write this girdling experiment or ringing bark experiment. Okay, so that completes our discussion on the summary of the transport of food. So if you have any doubts or clarification, you can get it clarified. Do you have any doubts or clarification, students?